Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Mel and I'm a crafter and knitter living on the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. If you are new here, then welcome, and if you're a returning viewer, then welcome back. If you haven't been here before, then like I said, my name is Mel and we live on a small holding on a relatively small island. And we keep chickens and ducks and we have cats and grow on vegetables and so on and so forth. This is a regular crafting podcast episode. My podcast episodes are usually knitting primarily and occasionally crafting other items like crochet, spinning, sewing, very occasionally. But today is all about the knitting. It has been a fair few weeks since my last actual podcast episode. We had Vlogtober, we did have Vlogtober, but then we had Vlogmas in December, and we've had a few topical videos at the beginning of this year too. So there is a fair few items to get you caught up with. I have 2 finished garments, for example, and several socks that got done the beginning of December-ish, and I have a couple of whips on the go as well. So my first finished object is the one that I'm wearing, and I love this item, and I'm glad now that I'm recording I can actually put it into my rotation for wearing as well. This is my stripes, hybrid stripes flax light sweater. So I will stand up and give you a quick look at the finished item itself, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So let's see if I can show you this without having to move the camera. But as you can see, it is a raglan sweater, and it is a stripes, obviously it's sweater, full length sleeves. I have done a broken 1x1 rib for the cuffs on the sleeves, and I'm just trying to remember, yes, I've done broken 1x1 rib for the waistband as well. I think I'm going to have to move the camera slightly. So lengthwise, this one is not cropped. This one comes past my hips, so my hip crease is here, so it comes past my hips, so this can be comfortably worn with a pair of jeans or sweatpants if I'm in the house. I'm wearing it over a dress today, so there's no reason why you can't wear it over a dress, but it is definitely designed more for trouser wear instead. So this sweater originally was going to be the stripes sweater by Andrea Mari, which is a round yoked stripes sweater. When I was at the Perth Yarn Festival year before last, I picked up some yarn by Nervous Fibre. We'll see if this will actually focus. There we go. I was having some real problems with my camera my last few videos, but hopefully it's sorted itself out now. So I bought 4 skeins of this base by Nervous Fibre, which is a alpaca, 70% alpaca, I think it's baby alpaca, 20% cashmere and 10% silk. It is a beautiful base, so super soft. I imagine it's going to pill because it is soft, and cashmere pills, and so does alpaca. Well, alpaca not so bad, but cashmere is a bit pilly. So I bought these 4 colours, which obviously you can see in the sweater, and I have this much left of 3 of them, so it's still a reasonable amount, and a tiny little ball left of the grey, because I used that for all of the ribbing. Actually the top ribbing is just regular 1x1 rib, because when I started this, that's obviously where I started, and I think I ripped out and re-knit this from the bottom up, because I always have issues with my necklines. I think I'm going to do provisional cast-ons for the necklines in future, for garments that I'm not sure on how the neckline's going to turn out, because I always end up ripping them out and it's a bit of a pain. But I do have plenty of this left for knitting something like a small shawl, or maybe a cowl. It would probably be enough for a cowl. So like I said, I'd originally bought this to make the striped sweater. I'd seen a sample knit in these yarns at Perth and I fell in love with it, and I bought the yarns for. But when I thought about it more, when I was going to be knitting the garment, I decided stripes in a round yoke sweater I didn't think would be very flattering on such a large bust as mine. I just thought it might look a little odd. It probably wouldn't, but you know, I was just a bit concerned about it. Instead I decided to go with a raglan stripe, the same stripes and the same widths roughly, but doing a raglan raglan sweater instead. So I decided to use the numbers for the Flax Light by Tin Can Knits. I haven't actually knit one of these before. I know like a lot of people have. It is a free pattern on Ravelry, and it has, although you can't see on this, it has a garter stitch panel down the sleeves. Oh yeah, I can see it now. It has a garter panel down the sleeves, but I didn't do that. I've just left it plain and just used the numbers for the Flax Light, and it's worked out really well. I really like it. I'm really happy with it. I'm glad it's off the needles. It took a long time to weave in all the ends because of all the stripes, but I got there. It took maybe 3 days of spending an hour or so here and there to just kind of, let's do one sleeve of ends and then do a bit of knitting, and then another day it was like one sleeve of ends and so on. But other than that, I really like it. I knit this on a, I think it's a 3mm needle. I did a 3mm needle at a 24 stitch gauge. I'm not sure on my rounds because I don't tend to pay much attention to rounds. It's not that often that it's that big a deal. It can be with a raglan sweater, but since I was hitting gauge on the stitches for the Flax Light anyway, I just, you know, went with it. So I went with 3mm needle, which is kind of my standard, usually for fingering weight anyway, and it has come out lovely. It's nice and lightweight. I did change the decreases for the sleeves. I find I often do unless they're quite roomy. So what I've done is done some decreases on this part of the sleeve, and then I've knit straight to get past my elbows, because my elbows are not narrower than my upper arm. And I find often sweater patterns, the sleeves, if you taper all the way, for example, I find it tends to be snug around here, because like I have quite chunky elbows and a little bit chunkier on the forearm, just here. So knit straight for about 4 inches, and then I began the decreases again before getting to the wrist. And I've done that on a few sweaters now actually, and it seems to work quite well. This one is more of a fitted sweater on the sleeves because it's the look I was going for with going with a pair of jeans. That was kind of like the idea with this sweater, and yeah, really happy with it. But it is not my only finished garment. In fact, I have 2 more, but I'm only going to try 1 more on, and I'll explain why when I get to the 3rd one. So let's move on to finished garment number 2. Quick change time. Okay, 2nd finished garment. This one is much more of a casual, cozy sweater, and I think I'll probably leave this on for the rest of the podcast, although it's making me look quite washed out, but it doesn't really matter. So this one I will stand up and show you again, but it is pretty plain as well, but it is using quite a variegated yarn. So one moment while I move this camera. So this is another one that is past hip length. Again, my hip crease is here, so this one is slightly longer than the stripes, and it is much more oversized than the stripes. If I, for example, there's my waist, it has quite a bit of room in this, which is what I was going for. In fact, when I was knitting it, I was a little worried I hadn't put enough room in it, but it is perfect. It is full sleeves again. This one has a much more relaxed sleeve, and I have done a 1x1 rib. Have I done 1x1 rib? Oh no, I've done 1x1 rib for the cuffs, and these are a looser cuff as well. The bottom I've gone with a broken rib again, which I really like for sweaters because it makes the garment just kind of hang. There's no pulling in at the waist, which is okay more on a cropped sweater, but on a longer sweater I definitely like, in fact even on a cropped sweater I prefer a broken rib so that it doesn't pull in. It just keeps the kind of the shape that I want. And it is another raglan, but I've used a different pattern for this one, and I have added extra, let me just shuffle in close. I've added extra, these like kind of garter bands on either side of the raglan. I've added these in myself, and really happy with that too. The other thing I've done with this is I've done an I-cord bind off on the neckline. Originally, it is knit top down, but originally I had done a kind of a rolled garter neckline and I didn't like it. It just looked weird. It was okay at the sides and the back, but the front was just big and oversized and baggy, and it kind of like hung like this. So I ripped it out and I did an I-cord bind off for this. I've also done short rolls at the back, which you probably won't be able to see, just to raise the neckline. And actually, in fact, I forgot to mention that I also did the same with the stripes. So the top pinky coloured stripe is much thicker at the back, and it gets narrower and narrower, so by the time you get to the front it is the same size as the other stripes. So I've done something very similar with this one and added short rows. In fact, I think I added, I'm trying to think back now because it's a few months since I originally started this, but if I remember rightly, when I first tried this on I decided that there wasn't enough short rows at the top, and I actually added extra short rows and then redid the neckline. So yes, I'm really happy with this. The pattern I actually use for this one is not the flax light. I have a pile of patterns here. It is somewhere here in my pile of patterns. There we go. It is the Salem sweater by Tristan Molina of Dragon Horde Designs. And I have knit this before, and with the cabling and bobbling design down the sleeves, but this time I've just used the numbers to get this nice deep raglan for the sleeves here. And I really liked my original one of this. In fact, I might even consider knitting this one again at some point down the line. I like the fit and I love the cabling on this one. I don't like doing cabling, and it's got bobbles, and I don't like doing bobbles particularly, but since doing this pattern the first time, I have learned better ways of doing bobbles, so it probably wouldn't be so bad. But I would like another one because it's so nice. It's quite smart and it's just got a really nice fit like this one has. This one was knit specifically for hanging around the house, basically at home, so which is why it's so oversized, and it is to go like over like sweatpants, leggings, that sort of thing. All I have left of this yarn is this tiny ball. That's all I have, because I like to use stuff up, and it worked out perfectly. The yarn that I used is one of my own hand dyed yarns from when I was a yarn dyer, and it is in the colourway Autumn Leaves in 80% Blueface Leicester, 20% nylon. There is my old logo if anybody is interested. I used to dye botanical dyed yarns and some acid dyed, but this one is botanically dyed. And I'm gonna have to try and remember what it's dyed with. I wonder if it says on this label. It does. I used to put all the dyes on labels, and then once I got too many colourways I didn't end up doing it all the time, but this one does. It is dyed with madder, marigold, pomegranate, myrobalan and walnut. And it is perfect. It is exactly how I wanted it to come out. The colours have come out really well. I had to do a little bit of I was alternating 4 skeins, not all at the same time, but I had to do a little bit of colour management when a bit of too much pooling was happening in one spot, so I having to cut the yarn and just rejig it a little bit or pull back a couple of rows if I wasn't happy. But it has worked out alright in the end. So I think that's about all I have to say about this sweater. So let's briefly talk about the finished sweater number 3. Mostly because I have talked about this quite a lot on other videos, but if you haven't seen them, which this is why I'm going to mention in this episode, I did a vlog over the Christmas period. Well, I did Vlogmas over the Christmas period and showed this garment then, but I also did a 2-part vlog specifically about knitting my Christmas cardigan, and it came out great. I'm going to struggle to show it whilst not wearing it, but I will do my best. But it came out great. It is lovely. I love it, and it's very, very festive and Christmassy. It is the Boreal sweater by Kate Davies, which is not, there we go, that one. And it is a sweater design, but I didn't make a, well, I did knit a sweater and then I steeked it and made a cardigan instead, because it's quite a thick, heavyweight cardigan. And I thought around December, I'm not going, well, I'm hanging around the house a lot. I want a cardigan for when it's really cold. So that's what I did. I steeked. I had to rejig. In fact, I had did part of the yoke and realised I wasn't going to be able to make it work for separating for sleeves and have the design run down the sleeves properly. So I had to rip it out and start the yoke again. I have talked about this more in the vlog videos, but I had to re-knit part of the yoke and rejig where the snowflakes were. But it came out really, really well, and I was playing yarn chicken and I won because I wasn't sure if I would have enough of this kind of off-white yarn for the top. The yarns, I have so many balls of yarns and bags beside me, is this and this. The red is Drops Alaska, and I'm not sure if I have the ball bands for them, possibly not, but the red is Drops Alaska, and the other one, bear with me one moment, I dashed for my phone because then I can check my Ravelry page. So the red is Drops Alaska in colourway number 11, dark red, and the white is Serdar Tweedy Chunky in the colourway 286 cream, which I believe is discontinued now, unfortunately. We're going to focus, there we go. But it's quite unusual, it's really weird, it's a bizarre base actually, and it kind of feels like a cotton yarn but not. It's fluffy, it's kind of like knitting with cotton wool. It's a little bit strange. It is a 40% wool, 45% acrylic, 15% alpaca, and can't really recommend it. It's discontinued now, so it's irrelevant, but it's just a little bit strange. It doesn't knit to gauge very well, it doesn't puff up at all. I have had issues where the top of the sweater I had to rip out and knit with a smaller needle to get a tighter gauge because it was so see-through. In fact, it's still a little bit, but it is better than it was. But we got there in the end. It was a bit of an epic to get there, but it got finished before Christmas, and that was the main thing. Other than that, I don't remember what changes, if any, that I made. The yarn is a different gauge to the original pattern. The original pattern is a Aran weight sweater, but Drops Alaska is it's a little bit on the heavier side. So the gauge I have changed for my cardigan. I'm just trying to find where I've wrote down my gauge and such like. Have I wrote it down in my Ravelry project? I haven't. That's a bit of a pain because I intend to knit another one of these. Okay, so apologies for that. I'm a little bit annoyed with myself that I haven't actually written down my needle size. But I did use the same needles, I think, as I did for my Skogenfjall, which I do believe I have here because I need it always to hand because I use it for number references all the time. So let's see. So many patterns. Okay, my Skog and Fjord sweater that I did quite well a few months ago, back last year anyway. I used 6mm needles and it was a 14 stitch gauge, which I am going to guess is what I've done with this because it is my preferred gauge for the drops iron weight yarns because they're all that little bit on the chunkier side. So I do plan on making another one of these in navy blue and white, but originally I had planned to do the beginning of this year, but I suspect it's probably going to be towards the back end of the year, coming up to the Christmas and winter season again. So that is my third finished garment, and now there's just a few finished socks before we move on to what my current whips are. So at the end of November I went over to Mum's house in the Highlands and I got stranded there for a couple of weeks due to a delivery I was waiting for that didn't turn up, and it came a week late. So I was stuck with whatever yarn I took over there, which wasn't a huge amount because I'd only planned on being there for a few days. So I finished the socks I was working on, and then I had only basically the sock yarns that I had left for my kind of my backup pair, plus I had some sock repairs I took over, so I actually had the rest of the yarn after doing the sock repairs that I could use to make more socks. So many socks were made in that 2 weeks. I don't have them all with me because some of them have been worn and are in the wash, but I will show you the ones that haven't been worn yet. So first of all, I knit these. These are in the colour, in the yarn Stylecraft Head Over Heels in the colourway Cupid. This is one of their Christmas ones even. Goodness me, words today. Christmas colourways they had brought out, I think it was last 2002 Christmas colourways. I could be wrong, there could be 2021. But they had 4 in a set, and I bought the set of 4. This was one of them, and like I said, it was colourway Cupid, and I've used Drops Fable for the contrast for the toes, heels and cuffs. It's just basic vanilla socks. I did a lot of vanilla sock knitting those 2 weeks. So Turkish cast on, eye partridge on slip stitch on just on the heel turn, stockinette on the heel flap. It does have a gusset on this vanilla sock recipe that I do, and I did a 20 round cuff. I always used to do a 25 round cuff, and I still do sometimes if I'm running out of yarn. This one I believe is a 20 stitch cuff, looking at it, because I had more yarn to go up the heel. I'm finding I prefer a little bit longer of stockinette and then a slightly shorter cuff at the top instead of what I was doing before, which was a slightly shorter stockinette and longer cuff. So I knit these, and I also used the same yarn to knit another pair of socks, which I don't have with me, but I will put up on the screen here. And I did contrast with a undyed yarn to make a... do you know what they remind me of? It was John that pointed it out. I did a green... I'm looking at my phone now because I don't have it with me, but I used the same Drops Fable for the toes, but the cuffs I did in undyed yarn, and I used... I think it was a merino bamboo that I can't really use for toes and heels because it'll just wear out, but on the cuffs it's perfect. And John pointed out that reminded him of the peppermint chew sweets you used to get. You probably still can get them. I don't know if you can get them in America, but in the UK they're like a white chewy sweet, and they're like mint flavoured, and they come in these wrappers. They've got like green and white and stuff and red on them, and they reminded him of those, and now it's stuck to them. Now my peppermint chew socks, and now I could really eat one of those. I think the last time I tried one they were disappointing, and they weren't that minty, and they just tasted like half chewing gum, but as a kid they were really nice. So I knit a second pair of socks with the Cupid yarn and used up all of the yarn for the 2 pairs. I also knit 2 pairs of socks using West Yorkshire Spinners colourway vintage tinsel, and this is a wool nylon stellina blend. They are really sparkly, and I knit 2 pairs of these, one for myself and one for my husband, and I used the West Yorkshire Spinners Blueberry Bonbon for the contrast for the heels, toes and cuffs. I also, on my husband's, did a little contrast band of colour, a couple of rows and the cast off at the top of the socks, just to make it easy when I'm washing the socks to pick out which is his and which is mine. I mean, they're relatively easy because he has quite large feet, but at a glance it's much easier to just pick them out. So that was 2 more pairs of socks. I also knit another pair of socks that I have with me, and this was using the yarn that I had from repairing another pair of socks. So I was busy sock knitting, I have to say, and I used let me find it, these socks, which for some reason I can't find a Ravelry page for. I'm gonna have to make another Ravelry page for these. Okay, so thinking back to the first pair of socks that I made with this yarn, so we'll scroll back a little bit, apologies for this, scroll back, right, okay, to 2020, which was the original pair of socks that I knit. 2020 Cascade Yarns Heritage Prints in the colourway Holidays, and this one is a merino nylon sock base, which if you know, you've been around here a while, you'll know that I'm not the biggest fan of, because they tend to wear out. So what I've done is my usual vanilla sock, but I've added Eye of Partridge slip stitch just on the ball of the foot here, and this time I also added them here before getting to the heel turn, because the socks I was repairing whilst I was away, they had worn out here, so I'm doing that before I have to repair them, so I might get some more wear out of them before they wear through. And I didn't have enough yarn to do the whole socks without some sort of contrast, but I was really struggling to find something that would go with this yarn from my stash. But I realised I had some of the Drops Flora in the colourway green, so I kind of introduced it in the ankles of these socks. So in the stripe here there is some Drops Flora, and in here before I get to the cuff, so it just kind of looks a bit more natural. And these are not twins, these socks, they are both slightly different, so you can see on the ankle they're very different here as well. And that's worked out really well, because it wouldn't have been strong enough on the ball of the foot, but it's quite okay in the ankle, and that managed to eke out enough yarn to make a whole pair of socks with those. Okay, whew, I should have brought a cup of tea with me, because I'm quite thirsty now. I have one more finished object. No, I have 2. Well, I have more socks. I do apologise for the sock session that's happening. So last week, or the week before, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I put out my video for my 2024 box of socks plan, and I plan to knit at least 1 pair of socks each month through the year, and then I will have a brand new box of new socks for myself for Christmas come December. And I have finished my January pair of socks. I have finished a bonus pair of socks as well, but I don't think they're going in the box. So this is my January socks for my box of socks, and there are yet more vanilla socks. February socks are not going to be vanilla, but January's were, because I needed something easy to work on in between other projects. Sorry, the lighting is a bit strange. It's a bit late in the morning. Early in the morning we get all the light coming in here, and once you get close to midday it's coming in here, so the shadows are kind of casting a little weird. They were fine when we started, but you know, time's ticked on a little bit. So the yarns. The yarn is a new yarn and a new base to me. The yarn is by Felt Fusion, which I have several of her yarns. I'll just fish the label out the middle of the cake. And this is the yarn. If it will focus, please. There we go. Not very well, and it is looking a little dark, so I do apologise for that. Let's see if we can get a better but there we go, that's a bit better. It is quite a cosy yarn with lots of purples and blues and a little bit of yellow and pink and green in there. It's really very, very pretty. So the colourway is called Heart on Your Sleeve, and it is 60% Superwash Exmo Blueface, 20% Superwash Corriedale, 10% Zwartbles and 10% nylon. And there is Felt Fusion's logo. Apologies if you can hear my tummy rumbling. It is probably getting close to lunchtime. I have just used Drops Fable in the colourway Blue Grey for the toes and the heels and the cuffs. And again, I've done a 20 row cuff, which looking at it now makes me think maybe I did a 25 row cuff for those, but I'm not going to count them at the moment. So yes, it is, they are really pretty. I really, really like them. They're very cozy, got this cozy look about them, and I love it. I'm interested to see how this yarn base holds up as a sock yarn. It's got a very woolly feel, very much like a commercial sock yarn, but it's got more bounce to it. In fact, if I remember rightly, I haven't used much of this yarn at all in comparison to what I would normally for a pair of socks. In fact, if you give me one moment, I will weigh how much yarn I have left. So I've only used 42 grams of yarn for my socks, which is pretty good actually. And I could tell when I was knitting it, it just knit up really, really fast. And it does have more of a, not like a woolen spun yarn feel, but almost, in the fact that it's got that bounce to it. So I'm really happy with that. And I have quite a lot of the blue left. So I could always knit a pair of socks the same, or maybe go with a, I don't know, something really wild, like a yellow contrast. But we shall see. That's down the line. But those are ready to go into my box of socks, the first pair of the year. But I also had a second pair of socks that I finished off after knitting those. They were started back in June, I believe, last year. And I don't know why, I think they just got put aside because I was doing other things. These are a merino nylon base, and I consequently have done a slip stitch on the ball of the foot. I have partridge, but I have only just done it on the heel turn because I'd already finished the first of these socks several weeks ago. The ankles, these cuffs are quite long on this because I was limited on yarn. These are actually a 30 row cuff, 30 rolls of 2x2 rib. The yarn was bought as 2 mini skeins, so I used 1 mini skein for each sock. In fact, I had, there must have been a couple of yards less on one than the other, so I've had to add a couple of rows of the contrast at the top of this sock. The yarns that I used, the main body of the sock is knit by, the yarn is by Wild Wool E17, and there is their logo. They are a British dyer. I'm not sure if they're still dyeing, I think they are, but I'm not 100% sure. I've had this yarn for several years now, and the colourway is Robin Redbreast, and it is a 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon base. And the contrast is in West Yorkshire Spinners in the colourway Nutmeg, just the West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply, and I do like this yarn base. It makes lovely socks. So I've used, this was, oh, going really dark now. This one is the same. No, not that sock. Which sock? The Christmas tinsel socks. I'm getting confused. There's too many socks. Okay, that is all the socks. Thank goodness. That only leaves what I'm currently working on, which isn't a whole lot. I have cast on a toe for my February socks, which is very little to show, so I'll very briefly show you a toe. I have a toe in Screaming Red, which is the colour I decided to go with for my February socks, and it is Screaming 80s Red. The colourway is Rudolph, and it is another one of the Stylecraft Christmas Head Over Heels colourways. And I will be knitting a lacy heart design up the front of the foot. The design is the Romantical Socks, and it is a free pattern on Ravelry, and it has hearts up the front. This is knit top down, but I am just going to reverse the lace pattern, and it is by Megan Schmaltz. And other than that, all I've been working on is a new cast on. Oh goodness, let me move my camera a little bit. There, that's a little bit better light. Oh, winter is a little bit awkward for recording without getting out my studio lights, and I prefer to record in daylight if possible rather than artificial light. So I cast on a new cast on. Let's see which is the front and which is the back. That's the back. Okay, it is a lace yoke sweater, which is going to be tricky to show, but I will do my best. And it is the Halloo sweater by Caitlin Hunter, which, as you can see, is a v-neck with an unusual v-neck rib to it, which I love. And it has this shoulder detailing, which, where is it? It has this kind of shoulder detailing, so it almost looks like a saddle shoulder at the top, and it has this beautiful lace and bubble design, which I'm about somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of the way through. It's not showing up great on camera, but it looks really pretty in person. I have a million stitch markers on this between the lace repeats. I have 30 stitch markers on here because the pattern repeat's quite small, but I knit in front of the TV, and if I don't have stitch markers in between, I will get myself confused, and I don't really enjoy having to rip back lace. So the yarns I'm using are 2 of my own hand dyed yarns. I have merino nylon high twist in the colourway Carnations, which is this kind of white with pink and gold speckles and a little bit of burgundy in there. And I'm holding it double with a silk mohair in the colourway Hounds of Love, which is a kind of a mauvey purple with gold and burgundy speckles and white parts too, like the album cover for Kate Bush. And it is knitting up beautifully. I am loving the way the colours are coming out with these yarns. It is gorgeous. I just absolutely love it. I love the way the gold is coming through on the pinks and the purples. I just think it's beautiful. Absolutely love it. Can't wait to wear this. I've seen many people's projects for this, and the necklines tend to be really wide, and I was worried about that. I didn't want it to be kind of like an 80s off the shoulder sweater. So what I've done is I started knitting a size smaller, which I did for the collar section, and once I got past all the rib, I just increased the stitches, which wasn't by very many, to be honest. It was about maybe 8 stitches, something like that. 8, was it 8 or 16? It was somewhere in that range. Just increased them in the row before the lace work, and now I'm knitting the actual size I'm aiming for. So like I said, the pattern is the Halloo sweater. I am knitting the size 6 for the main body of it. It is a top down round yoke lacework sweater, which you can see here. Not great in black and white, but at least you can see lace and bubbles. Probably clearer than you will with my speckle yarn, to be honest. And full sleeves, and like it's quite a wide neckline, but I'm not sure if I want it that wide. So I've done it slightly smaller. It also has the lacework on the bottom of the sleeves too, which I haven't decided if I'm going to do yet. I probably will, but I hadn't even noticed it, to be perfectly honest, and now I just have to decide if I'm going to do that. So that is pretty much all I'm working on at the moment. I'm about to start working again on an older project. Apologies for the zips. Which I haven't worked on since I last showed, and all I have is a cuff for and colour work. I'm trying this year to kind of get through some of my older whips. I don't have a lot, to be honest. I only have about maybe 8, but I'm not itching to cast anything on. I'm more itching to cast things off at the moment. So that's why this older pair of socks I finally got off the needles, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do this year. Always keep something of my older whips kind of actively being worked on. I did start working on the mushroom Kelly Muff mittens that I'd knit halfway on one and realised it was too small, so I had to rip it all out and go up a needle size. But I've tried knitting that, and I've got, you know, couple of inches into the colour work, and I keep having to rip it out because I'm not happy with the colours that I'm using for the pattern band in between the mushrooms. So it's kind of on the back burner till I figure out what I want to do. I suspect I'm going to have to go back down a needle size, but just increase the amount of pattern repeats, because it just looks a mess basically. So instead I picked back up my Wishmaker mitts, which I'm doing in tones of greens and white and golds, and a goldy brown, but greens and whites, green being the main background rather than the blue. This is by Erica Husa Designs, and I've been meaning to knit these for ages. I think it's quite funny because my husband has a war on dandelions. He hates dandelions. He's definitely more of a kind of suburban garden guy, so, well, I suppose dandelions do kind of take over the garden, but he has this real issue with specifically dandelions, and they do tend to be all over the garden, although less so since he's had a war on them. He doesn't like weed killing them, he just like goes in there with a hoe every time he sees one, or he pulls the tops off all the time, and it's just it's quite funny. So I'm going to have dandelion mittens, which, I don't know, it just tickles me. So I think that's all of the knitting, and it's going to be a long one, this episode, so I do apologise. I do try to keep them shorter normally. I like to try and keep them under half an hour if possible, but I suspect this one's going to be a little bit longer. So next month I have got my hearty patterned socks to knit. I want to finish this Hello sweater, and I would like to get those mittens done and off the needles. I would think that's kind of doable. I suspect there will be another cast on at some point. Once I get into the stockinette section of the Hello sweater, I might be thinking, should I cast something else on? But it depends how quickly I can get through the other items, to be honest. Everything seems to be a lot of chart work. The lace, hearty lacy socks, they'll be chart work. The Hello sweater is chart work. The Wishmaker mitts is chart work. So until I get past the lace section of the Hello sweater, it's all reading charts. I could do with something that's just kind of mindless for when I get quite tired on an evening. But to be honest, I don't really want to cast on a second pair of socks. So I'm not sure what to do about that. I was thinking about it last night and I'm just not sure. So I think I might have to leave that here today. I'm going to go outside today whilst we have a little bit of sunshine. We have a big storm planned. Not planned, good God, we don't plan for storms. Well, we do, but we don't plan on deliberately having them. We have a storm arriving tomorrow, well, this evening into tomorrow, it's going to be quite windy. We're talking mid-70s miles per hour. So tomorrow's not really getting out in the garden weather. It's hunkering down sort of weather. So I'm going to make the most of the very still, very sunny morning, although it is very cold. And I think I'm going to set away some seeds in some seed trays. I haven't set away my chilies or my tomatoes or my cucumbers yet. But I was waiting on a heat mat because our heated propagator wasn't working properly last year. So that is the task for today whilst I have some decent weather. So I'm going to go now and have a hot drink before my throat completely gives up and I can't talk for the rest of the day. Not that I do a lot of that. And have some lunch, I think. And I shall see you on the next video. Bye bye.